Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kirby Smart, the Georgia Bulldogs, keeping the fellas busy, landing their third commitment in the last 24 hours. This one coming from four-star safety Jaylan Morgan from the state of Tennessee. You look at Jaylen Morgan, I think one of the most intriguing aspects of Jaylen Morgan's game is the versatility that you have with this kid. I mean, you look and project to the collegiate level. Jaylen Morgan, I think, could really be good at that star position for Georgia. Certainly a box safety, but I also think has the athleticism and range to play that free safety position as well. You talk about Kirby Smart recruiting not only really good football players, but football players that fit what Georgia wants to do on both sides of the football. We said it with Shamari Earls, big physical long cornerback yesterday, kind of what Georgia looks for in the boundary cornerback position. You look at Jaylen Morgan, versatile defensive back that can do a lot of different things. This is exactly what Kirby Smart likes to get out of the recruiting trail, fired up to get into the film. Talk about, how Jaylen Morgan and what Jaylen Morgan brings to this Georgia defense. Before we get into it, as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Massive shout out to the Georgia fans. It's been a busy last couple of days on the recruiting trail. A lot of commitments to break down, and the amount of support, the amount of code dogs you guys drop in the comment section, that stuff, it means the world to the boys. Can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into Jaylen Morgan. I think one of the more fascinating aspects of Jaylen Morgan before we get into the film is this is a safety that can play a high level of man coverage. And when you have safeties that you can trust in man coverage, whether it's against jumbo wide receivers or slot tight ends or kind of those shorter, shiftier slot wide receivers, it gives your defense so much different kind of flexibility in terms of the alignment you want to have, the blitz packages that you want to bring. It's really hard to find safeties that have the ability to have the man coverage skills that kind of cornerbacks do. Jaylen Morgan is one of those guys because he plays a lot of cornerback at the high school level. I think that's what fires me up the most about Jaylen Morgan. You dive into the film and say the versatility is what stands out first, right? You look at Jaylen Morgan here and kind of playing that box safety role where he's going to creep up into the box and be a guy that just commands that short, intermediate, middle part of the field, not afraid to come downhill and be physical at the point of attack. That's kind of what you're looking for in a box safety. You kind of get up to the next piece of film, you're going to see Jaylen Morgan hold up in man coverage against one of those jumbo. This is going to be a tight end, but you look at that star position. I mean, there's going to be a lot of times you're matched up with some of those split out wide tight ends. Think about how Georgia used Brock Bowers last year. You have to have defensive backs that have that size to deal with some of those bigger pass catchers. You fire up the film here. Jaylen Morgan going to deal with what looks to be a big physically imposing tight end that's going to try to work some contact. Jaylen Morgan, just too big, too physical for this tight end to really create any sort of separation and use that physicality. Jaylen Morgan's a bigger safety that can deal with some of those bigger pass catchers. And then the last part you just love is you see a lot of film as a boundary cornerback. And again, you have that conversation of the importance and the value that you get when you have safeties that can hold up in man coverage. Jaylen Morgan's one of those guys. I mean, he's got really smooth hips, really nice change of direction, and you see him kind of mirror this wide receiver, break on, kind of throw on the front hip and break on the football. Having a safety that can hold up in man coverage, that's massive. You look at this Georgia class in 2025, and you're really starting to like how the secondary is coming along for Georgia, where you start scrolling down and say, and one thing we love is Shamari Earls. I mean, at least in my mind, just a true cornerback number one that can play the boundary, has the size and athleticism to deal with a lot of those elite caliber wide receivers that you see in the SEC. Another really intriguing get is Todd Robinson, a guy that plays a lot of wildcat quarterback, running back down in Georgia, going to make that transition to the safety position. Another guy that can give you some value as a box safety because of the physicality that he has. You turn on the running back film for a guy like Todd Robinson, you have no question marks about how he can hold up at that star position or box safety role. And then you get a guy in Jaylen Morgan, who I think is a do-it-all defensive back that can play either the star or box safety, a free safety role. I like what Georgia's doing in this 2025 cycle specifically in the back end. But you look at Jaylan Morgan, I think what excites me the most is this is a guy that brings you that kind of versatility that Kirby Smart really covets. We had the same conversation about Shamari Earls late last night in terms of, hey, Shamari Earls is a really good football player, but I think what excites me the most is how he fits exactly how Georgia wants to play defense. You look at Jaylen Morgan, really good football player. Nobody's arguing that. But I think what's more important is Georgia making sure they're not only getting really good football players, but they're getting guys that do exactly what Georgia wants to do on the defensive side of the football, premier football players matched up with fitting really well in terms of the schematics of the Georgia defense. That, at least in my opinion, is what you're looking for. Another massive commitment for the Georgia Bulldogs. We will close on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it again. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.